Mexico versus the UK, which is better for living in my opinion. Now, I've been living in Mexico for nearly 3 years now, since the start of 2021. And there's a lot of things I love about Mexico, a lot of things I love about the UK, and a lot of things I hate about both as well. So let's get into it. Okay, so the first one that everybody probably wants to know about, the cost of living. Now, this completely depends. Now, Mexico is obviously going to be a lot cheaper. However, it depends on your lifestyle and where you want to live. Like, if you want the same standard of living in Mexico as you would have in the UK, then you're probably going to be paying around the same price or a little cheaper. So for example, if you want to live in like Cancun or Mexico City, one of these big popular places, you are going to be paying a lot more for rent and food and restaurants and stuff like that. However, if you take the option like I have, I live in a smaller city, so out of the way of a lot of tourists, then it will be a lot cheaper. Like, my rent right now is about £300 a month, and I rent a small little house in a very good and safe area of the city I live in. It's got 1 bedroom, a living room, kitchen, and a garage downstairs that I'm currently in now that is my office. So I save the most of my money on rent. However, if you want to rent the same type of place that I'm in now, in a good area in like Mexico City or Cancun, you would probably be paying around 3 times the price for that. Now, obviously, if you're living in like London in the UK, then it's going to be miles cheaper. But for me, I'm from up north in the UK, so the rent isn't too much cheaper than I'd be paying here. So I don't save masses of money on rent, but the most of the money I do save is on rent. Now, the food. So if you go to like a Walmart or a big, like a Costco or something like that, you are going to be paying the same price, if not more, I've found for food. Like for me, I eat a lot of steak and a lot of meat, and I am paying more on groceries than I would be in the UK. Now, if you can eat cheaper or you don't eat as much meat as I eat, then you probably will save a lot on groceries and food. Currently, I don't live near any small markets, but most places in Mexico, they have small local markets where you can get really cheap food, and you will save a lot of money like this. So currently right now on my diet, I'm spending like about £500 a month on food. But if you were to eat cheaper and weren't eat a lot of steak or chicken and stuff like that, and it was more veggies and carbohydrates and stuff like that that you're eating, like rice and potatoes and some meat here and there, you could probably get your food bill down to about 200, 250 a month for one person. So yeah, you can save a lot of money on groceries, especially if you shop at the local markets. And lastly, doing stuff, utility bills and stuff like that. So electric here is way cheaper than the UK, a lot cheaper. Like, my electric bill is about £20 per month, but we don't use air conditioning and we don't use heating. So that's just for the shower, cooking, computers, phones, and it's about £25 a month. And that seems to stay the same across the whole country. So you do save a lot on utility and stuff like gas and electric. And internet is around 500 as well. Sorry, internet is about £25, 500 pesos. And for doing things like activities and stuff like that, going traveling, yeah, it is a lot cheaper than the UK. Like, to go out for a meal at a restaurant, it's about £10 per person at the average restaurant, where in the UK it's probably like 15, 20. If you want to do like activities and you need taxis and stuff like that, the price is way cheaper. So overall, the cost of living definitely goes to Mexico. But again, it just depends on your lifestyle. Okay, so the next point, the culture. Now, what you'll notice living in Mexico is that people are very friendly. They like to party a lot. They like to have a good time. However, things go a lot slower here. So if you need something done, it's probably going to take a lot more time than in the UK. Here in Mexico, it's a lot more laid back and a lot more chill, which is good in some instances, but if you want something done fast, it can be a lot slower sometimes. Another thing as well, I'm not the biggest fan of the culture. It can be very loud out here. So at the weekend, there's a lot of parties and stuff like that, fiestas going on. So if you don't like a lot of loud noises and loudness, then yeah, Mexico maybe isn't the country for you. I've learned to deal with it and I've grown to sort of love it in ways. But yeah, definitely it's more of a loud culture and a loud place compared to the UK. Now, the UK, I find that people are often very cold sometimes. Like, you don't get the friendliest of customer service. Like here in Mexico, if you walk into a store, they'll say good morning, good afternoon, they'll greet you, they'll have a smile on their face. And it was a funny story actually, when we came to England to visit with my girlfriend, whenever we'd walk in a store, she'd be like, oh, good morning, good afternoon. And then the people working in the store in England were just like they didn't interact or they didn't offer good customer service. So yeah, like the customer service side of things and people's attitudes and mentality, people are a lot more friendly here, and that's a big reason why I love living in Mexico. However, the one thing I do miss about the UK is just a sense of humour And obviously there's no language barrier there. So when I go into a store or something like that, or I'm meeting people, I can have a laugh and joke in my own sense of humor and own culture. So that is one big thing that I do miss about the UK. You don't have the same sense of humor here. It is different. So overall, it's kind of hard to pick a winner for culture. I slightly prefer Mexico more, but it just depends on what you like. Okay, the next one is the language barrier. So when I first moved here, I was expecting more people would speak English. Like, I used to live in Thailand a few years ago, and the majority of people in Thailand speak English. So for some reason, I kind of assumed that, I don't know why, about Mexico. And then I remember I was in for a massive shock when I arrived in Mexico City, and I tried to go to a restaurant, order a coffee, do anything, and I found that it's probably only about maybe 15-20% of people that speak English here. However, what you do find is a lot of people understand English, but they're just they're not confident enough to speak it. So they will understand you sometimes, but they're just not confident in their ability, or they may be shy and they don't want to speak in English. So yeah, the language barrier is definitely a minus here if you're not willing to learn Spanish. Like, if you're going to move here, you're going to have to learn the basics. Like, for me, my Spanish is nowhere near perfect, but I know the basics to get around. But obviously I do have a lot of help from a girlfriend, luckily, and if I didn't have her, I probably wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things with my current Spanish level. So yeah, definitely you'll have to learn the language, and obviously in the UK speak English, so if you speak English then you don't need to worry. So obviously for this language point, England is going to win, but Mexico, it's its own country, it has its own language, so you got to respect that and you got to learn it. So the next point is the weather. So obviously a clear winner here is Mexico. Now, you might think of Mexico as being really hot and humid all the time. However, it's not. Like, the climate here varies so much. It depends where you want to live in Mexico. So for example, if you want to live in Cabo or Cancun or Tulum, yeah, it's going to be hot the majority of the time and very humid. However, I live in a state called Veracruz, and here we've got every type of climate almost. There's a town called Perote where it snows sometimes and it's cold. I've been there in Christmas and it gets cold sometimes, like the same coldness as England. There's a city, Jalapa, which is the one I live in. That has a very varied climate. It rains a lot and it's more cool. Obviously it's still hot a lot of the time too, but it has more milder temperatures compared to like Cancun and other places. And then there's another city in this state called Veracruz, Puerto, and that is normally hot all year round. So depending where you want to live, you can find different climates about. Whereas England, it's sometimes hot in the summer and it rains all the time and it's cold in the winter. So Mexico has a clear winner here for the weather. You can find any type of climate you want, really. Next point is the food. Now, I know British food gets a bad rep, but I do miss it sometimes being here. Just that nice English comfort food. However, the Mexican food is just top tier. Out of all the countries I've been to, it has some of the best food in the world, hands down. Like some tacos, tamales, enchiladas, quesadillas. You've got so many options here and the food is just so flavorful. And you often find, definitely recommendation for restaurants, avoid the mid-tier restaurants. Either go to the cheap taco stands or the more expensive restaurants, because that's the best food. The middle restaurants are just like meh, but if you go to like a cheap taco stand that's very busy with a lot of people, you'll probably have the best tacos of your life. So yeah, hands down, I do miss British food sometimes, but Mexican food, clear win. The next point is safety. Now, you've probably heard of a lot of horror stories about Mexico. Like, oh, you'll die, you'll get killed if you go there, it's not safe. I haven't had any issue living here for the past over 2.5 years. I think a big reason for that is because I'm not stupid and I don't put myself in stupid situations. However, I have traveled to a lot of places around the country, and there's only been a couple times where I've had some weird instances with taxi drivers, and that's about it. But even then, it ended up being okay. Now, a big thing is, if you don't involve yourself with the wrong type of crowds, like you're not doing any illegal things or you're not partying super hard and stuff like that, the chances of you getting into trouble here are very, very low. The people who do get killed here or do find themselves in dangerous situations are people, they're in the party scene, they're doing a lot of illegal substances. And if you involve yourself in that crowd, or if you go to the well-known bad areas, you're just asking for trouble. So if you lay low, be respectful, and don't be stupid, you won't have any problems with safety. I've had more bad issues living in England than I have in Mexico. And I can say, surely, I am more comfortable walking around Mexico City than I am London. So the safety here, it might sound strange, it might be a shock, but Mexico for me is a safety. So the next category is location. Now, this is the one with England, I think the benefit is you're kind of in the center of the world. So wherever you want to go, there's cheaper flights and it's easy to get to. Whereas in Mexico, unless you want to travel the Americas, it is going to be difficult to travel places. Like if I want to travel back home, it's very expensive. Or let's just say I wanted to go to like Dubai or Asia, then it's really awkward flight paths from Mexico. So yeah, unless you want to visit a lot of the Americas, you want to go to like the USA, Canada, Colombia, Brazil, I would say the UK has a better location. It's more centralized, I guess, and it's more available to other places. So yeah, for me, the UK does win on location. And that concludes my Mexico versus UK. Now, for me, Mexico does slightly edge out. However, because I'm British at heart, I do still have a sweet spot for the UK and I do still visit it often. But yeah, there's many benefits to living in Mexico.